Midwifery Advisory Council meeting. I'm Diane Holzer, the new chair. This will be my first meeting, so please bear with me if I make a few mistakes, because this will be my first time doing it. I'd like to remind everybody to please turn their phones to vibrate, your cell phones to vibrate if you can, and your pagers as well if you still have those. Reminding you that our meeting is being webcasted, and if you'd like to make public comment, please fill out the little slips in the back of the room and give them to Miss Sewell, right here. Answer. MAC members, as a reminder, during today's meeting, any items requiring a vote will be done by a roll call vote. This means that once a motion is made and seconded, Ms. Sewell will call each of our names individually to request our vote, at which time you can vote in favor, against, or abstain. Any questions about that? Okay. I'd like to now call the meeting to order and ask that Ms. Sewell please call the roll.
Dr. Adams? Ms. Brillia?
Present.
Ms. Dugan?
Present.
Ms. Perez?
Present.
Ms. Yaroslavsky? Ms. Holzer?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. A quorum is present. So we can move to the first order of our agenda, public comments that aren't on the agenda. Do we have any comments? I see we have at least one. By Kaleem.
My name is Kaleem Joy. I'm a licensed midwife, certified professional midwife, and by recommendation of the prior chair, Carrie Sparavon, she asked that I just come and let the board know of a new pilot program that we're working on in the state. It is called the new Licensed Midwife Mentorship Program Pilot Project. We launched this project in October of last year. The goal is to increase the quality of care for midwives serving in home and out of hospital and birth centers by matching them up with an experienced midwife as soon as they get out of school that we can connect with them. Their mentorship will last 2 years, and they will meet with their mentor once a month, either in person or virtual. And during that time, they will go over action steps or goals each quarter to help them establish their business, as well as to go over their client selection and improve critical decision-making skills and problem-solving with their client load. In the process of this, they will also turn in a monthly review that will help us with the program to see how the efficacy is working and to improve areas. We also have quarterly conference calls to ask for their support and guidance to improve the program so that at some point in time it can be taken statewide. The hope is to create better relationships in their communities, which will help them have more resources, and to improve the quality of their decision-making and their critical decision-making skills. We also have prepared a startup and reference guide for them that outlines everything that we could possibly imagine in learning to be an autonomous midwife, from learning about the MAC board, their state organizations, filing their LMAR, midwifery assistants and students, precepting, being mandated reporters. And it went on to also tell them everything about starting up their business and all the accounts that they need to have on board. We also created templates for forms so that they had them for referrals for antenatal, postnatal, gynecologically, and newborns using the SBAR format, since that's what's most familiar in the medical community. And these can be put directly on their letterheads. We're also giving them some templates of informed consents so that they have those for things such as GBS, and newborn screen, of course, comes from the state. We will run the pilot. Once the pilot's done, we'll open it up. And once we open it up to state, we hope at some point in time to have it solid enough to hopefully have one of our state organizations take it over and continue it from there. One of the things that may be informational for the board is that this type of a program, if things go well, may be something that may be for rehabilitation or remediation possibilities that may be supportive to that. And I don't know whether you can ask questions when something's not on the agenda, but I did bring handouts of just the outline if you want it. Okay,
I was just informed we can't ask questions, but I have a lot.
really good. Can I offer this to them?
Yeah.
The one page?
I'll review it first, and then if there's not an issue, I will pass it out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kaleem. Any other public comments? Rosanna, you didn't have something? I thought you wanted to say something.
Rosanna Davis, licensed midwife with California Association of Licensed Midwives. And I just wanted to ask if I could do a presentation at the next MAC meeting on protected peer review and what the new status for licensed midwives of having protected peer review means and the implications of it.
So can she ask that now, or does that come up? Does that come up when we have agenda items? Or?
Yeah, that would fall under future agenda items, but she's
Okay.
brought it up,
Okay.
so you
We'll
can
have it. Okay.
ask that it be on there.
Great. Okay, the next thing on the agenda is a report from the chair, and I don't have a big report as I haven't been doing a lot of work yet. I've been talking on the phone with Carrie, just trying to catch up, but there are no new items that we're not going to be discussing that I know of right now. So then we can move on to the next agenda item, which is the approval of the minutes from March 1, 2018 MAC meeting. Are there any changes or concerns regarding the minutes in the last meeting?
I have a couple of corrections, Diane.
Mhm.
On page 5, it says that I was the representative to the board and served on the MAC when it was developed. I was the California Association of Midwives representative to the board and also represented the California Association of Midwives to the MAC when it was developed. I've never served on the MAC before. It's the
Can you point out the paragraph, maybe?
third,
1, 2, third paragraph.
no, page 3-5.
Oh, up there. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm assuming that staff is taking the notes on this, right? So, okay.
And then on page 8, in the last paragraph, there's a typo. The last date that's given is 2007, but it should be 2017, not the 2007 in the first line.
Okay.
No, not that one.
Okay, are there any other changes? Any public comments from those in the audience?
You may want to ask for a motion to approve with the changes.
Can we approve the changes as outlined by Claudia?
Or a motion to approve the minutes with the
With
two
the
changes.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes with the approved changes, with the suggested changes?
Second.
All in favor?
Now ask
Oh,
for
now
public
you have to,
comment.
oh, now ask for public comment. Is there any public comment on the changes or the minutes? Okay, would you like to call the roll?
Dr. Adams? Ms. Brelia?
Abstain.
Ms. Dugan?
In favor.
Ms. Perez?
Approve.
Ms. Holzer?
Approve. Okay, then moving to the next agenda item.
You can just clarify that the motion passed.
Oh, the motion passed. And the next agenda, item 5, Ms.
Okay, so this is going to be a fast agenda item because the update on midwifery legislation is there is no midwifery legislation currently in the legislature. The last bill that I updated you on last time, AB 2682 Burke, which related to removing physicians' supervision for certified nurse midwives, actually died in the Senate Business and Professions Committee in June 2018. So right now, there's no midwifery legislation going through the legislature.
Okay,
Concludes my presentation.
thank you. And moving on to the next agenda item, number 6, update.
You're free to ask for comments from the MAC members and also the public.
Okay. Are there any comments from the members or the comment on the? Seeing none, we can move on to the next agenda item. Update on the continuing regulatory efforts. That would be the same as the legislation, or is this, no, this is Mrs. Webb, sorry.
Unfortunately, there is not any change to our progress on those regulations. There's a stall. It would be helpful to get legislation to move it forward, and we hope to be able to see progress next year.
Okay. So then that means we are seeking a legislative remedy.
That's hasn't been confirmed yet. All that has to go through the staff and then the board.
Any public comments?
Rosanna Davis. COM is going to be shopping a bill this year that would remedy some of the things that have resulted in regulatory stalemate. That's all. How do we, is there a mechanism for working? I guess there just need to be interested party meetings for the board and the midwife community to work together on legislative fix.
You can always ask staff for technical assistance, and then any bills impacting licensed midwives would go before the board to determine whether they would support it or support if amended or oppose.
Okay, thanks.
And I'm assuming anything that ends up happening within the board, then the outreach will go to the California midwives and or maybe,
Yeah.
maybe not.
We're always available
Okay.
as staff to be in communication with licensed midwives, MAC members, any interested party.
Okay. Any comments from the members? No. All right, seeing none, let's move to agenda item number 7, the update on the licensed midwife annual report task force. Ms. Alameda?
At the April board meeting, the board members approved the recommendation from the MAC regarding the revisions to the LMAR reporting tool. Staff is currently working on updating the data system and will work with OSHPD to begin the new data reporting for the 2018 reporting period. Information related to the changes will be provided to licensed midwives by the end of the year. I also would like to take this opportunity to clarify the reporting requirements of the LMAR and the data that is collected by OSHPD. Pursuant to Business and Profession Code Section 2516, each licensed midwife has until March 30th of each year to complete the LMAR and submit to OSHPD. Failure to do so will result in a renewal hold placed on their license. OSHPD must provide the final report to the board by July 30th of each year. The board has received several inquiries about what occurs if a midwife submits a report late, and the data that is reflected in the final report prepared by OSHPD. Board staff contacted OSHPD regarding this matter and was informed that the data collected reflects all data received as of the date that the report is generated. So, for example, if OSHPD generates the report on July 15th, that report is going to reflect anything submitted by that date. Although the data that is submitted late is included in that report, it doesn't change the fact that licensed midwives are required to submit it by the March 30th deadline. So I just wanted to clarify that because this last reporting period, I did receive calls, asking when it's due, what information is actually in the report. Are there any questions? No? Okay.
Any comments questions from those in the audience? No, I guess not. Thank you, Mrs. Almeida. I guess then we're going to move on to agenda item number 8, discussion and possible action on Midwifery Advisory Council term limits. And you were going to give us an update on that as well.
Yeah, before the discussion, the MAC requested board staff to provide background information at the August 2018 MAC meeting on the term limits the board utilizes and what limits other state board utilize. Business and Profession Code Section 2509 established the MAC, but the law did not address the length of term nor the maximum number of consecutive terms. The law did specify that at least one half of the MAC members shall be California licensed midwives. Staff recommended that the MAC consist of 6 members, 3 licensed midwife, 3 public members, and 1 licensed physician, which was adopted by the board in February of 2007. In April 2011, the MAC discussed possible term limits, and it was decided not to pursue at that time. Staff has conducted research and found that the board members are appointed to a position with a 4-year term and may not serve more than 2 consecutive full terms. The Special Faculty Permit Review Committee does not have formal term limits. Committee members represent each medical school located in California. Board members of various committees do not have formal term limits. The California Physician Assistants Board members serve 2 consecutive terms. And a review of other states found that of the 24 states that have licensed midwife, 10 require no more than 2 consecutive terms, 1 requires no more than 1 consecutive term, and the other states do not have term limits. It is recommended that MAC members be appointed for a term of 3 years with a maximum term limit of 2 consecutive terms and 2-year term limits for officers. So that's my update. That's the information that the MAC members asked for at the last meeting. And this is where, you can have the discussion to decide how you want to move forward.
Okay. And what are officers?
You're an officer.
I'm an officer.
Yeah.
You mean like the chair and the vice chair or
Right.
something like that? Okay.
I have a clarification question. What's written here says staff recommended that the MAC consist of 6 members, 3 licensed midwives, and 3 public members, one of which is a licensed physician. You said 3 public members and a licensed physician, so that would be 7.
I'm sorry. It's 3
3.
licensed midwives, 1 public member, and 1 licensed physician. 3,
So
4, 5.
That's
So
5
I'm missing
members.
1. Two public members.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. It's too bad Barbara's here because I think she had the most strong feelings about this out of all of us. The members have discussion they would like to make about the term limits?
I would. I actually had a discussion with my peers in Los Angeles, and I just wanted to mention that the following midwives are in support of requiring midwifery advisory council term limits. There was not a discussion on what those limits look like, so it was important that we understand that they weren't saying how many, they just believe it's a good thing to come up for discussion. Tiffany Gallo, license number 409. Aaliyah Clark, license number 533. Megan Bochum, license number 299. Rachel Donklis, license number 489. Sue Turner, license number 48. LaMonica Bryant, license number 181. Jocelyn Brown, license number 449. Lauren Hyde, license number 451. Christian Toscano, license number 492. Bliss Young, license number 485. Michelle Gerber, license number 243. Amy Tinney, license number 254. And Sheila Fieldman, license number 420. So they are all in support of there being term limits. Also, we went ahead and asked the student midwives, the senior student midwives who will probably be sitting this next year, and the ones that were in support of requiring term limits as well are Jordan McCarth. These are all in Los Angeles. Alexis Starting, Jessica Diggs, Katie McBride, Joy Hicks, Jessica Packman, and Michelle Ray. And so I just wanted to make sure that that was relayed. And I had none sign on the other side. They were all in agreement that there should be some kind of term limit.
Any other comments?
I have a couple of concerns about term limits. One is that many midwives signed that, but not many midwives have applied when there's a vacancy for midwives. The last 2 times we had to go into extended periods, and it's been difficult to find midwives who are willing to serve. The other issue is that it can be very difficult to find supportive physician members who want to be involved and want to support the midwives. So I'm concerned that term limits will become more of a problem than a solution.
Thank you.
I'd like to echo what Claudia said. I think, too, it can take some time to learn your role on this board. And if you have someone really experienced who's leaving and there's not a suitable replacement, it can create a problem in and of itself, just having the term limits. And there is a very finite number of midwives in California who have the time and availability for these roles.
I'd like to say that I think that it would be important for there to be, I heard today that Claudia had an introduction when she came this morning, and I thought that was really great to be able to have that, and I think that maybe we can have more education to the people who are coming onto the board, such as myself. I was really impressed with the history that was given at the last meeting, and so I think that maybe a way for us to change this would be to find a way to create that education for the students, like in the pilot program that was just brought up, so that more midwives understood what this board does and how it can help, so that we will continue to have new midwives that are coming into the field, and others be able to understand what this position is and see if it's something that they feel is a good job for them in fighting, all of the issues and doing what is being done here. So I think that those kind of issues can be addressed, but I think there should be more opportunity for other midwives, and I think that's what happened at peer review when we had these discussions, is that they felt like they weren't really involved and they wanted to become involved, and how could they become involved? So that's where I agree that I believe that term limits is a good idea, but I think we also need to do more mentoring and more understanding of this position.
I have the same concern that Claudia had voiced, and that I think term limits is not a bad idea because it does allow for different voices to be heard. Although as an audience and participating in the audience is also a way to be involved and an important way to be involved. I would hate to see a position left vacant or filled with a half-willing member because the limit has expired.
And I also would like to say that I don't know that that would happen. I know of a handful of really great physicians who are extremely, amazing physicians in Los Angeles that help the community. So I wonder if that would be a problem or not. We don't know.
Well, if the past is any way to put any input into it, I think it has been really hard to find physicians to sit on this board. And when they agree to sit on the board, often they're not able to come. We've had some physicians who sat on the board who have only come to a few meetings. So I think it's a big issue, trying to find physicians to be on the board.
You may want to ask for a motion to take a position.
Do any of the board members have a different motion to put forth?
Or a motion. A motion has not yet been made.
Does anyone have a motion to make regarding this? I'm not hearing total consensus, so I don't know it's going to be hard to put forth a motion.
I motion that we require term limits.
For the term that has been suggested by staff.
And that would be, was that 2 terms?
3 years with a maximum term of 2. Yeah.
You do have the option to break this up, where you first say motion for term limits. It's fine to do it together if you know.
I know. I would say motion for term limits, but then under discussion what those look like. That's what I'd like to motion.
So Ms. Perez moved to support imposing term limits. If that passes, then the discussion would be what those would look like. If it fails, then the matter is over.
Is there a second for that motion? No second, then the motion doesn't carry. Do we have an alternative motion, perhaps?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I was unable to attend the last meeting. I was unable to attend the last meeting due to illness, which I'm sorry about, but I would love to have a paraphrased version of what Barbara was thinking when this conversation came up so that I have a better understanding of why this is being discussed right now.
Well, to paraphrase Barbara, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Okay. Thank you.
I think those were some of the words that she used. She expounded, but that was
Okay.
that was the
Thank you.
succinct version
Thank you.
of what she said. I don't know if staff can expound on what she said.
No,
but
that's what she said.
Yeah.
This was brought up by Carrie Sparavon, and it was tabled to this meeting for staff to come back with just more history. And as you can see, this was brought up before, and it kind of ended the same way, where a decision couldn't be made and it was just left as is.
Yeah. mean, we haven't had problems yet, but I don't know. Carrie just left that as her goodbye gift to us.
I think the other thing she did, though, was that there wasn't enough of us present at the last meeting, and she felt that that's what I heard when I was watching, that she was going to table it, that it should be tabled to this meeting when we were all present. I believe that one of the reasons that she thought it was a good idea to table it was because there weren't very many of us because of the weather conditions and the flight cancellations that were available at the last meeting, and so that it would be better to be brought up when we were all present, or more of us.
Well, so the motion did not carry, but I would be willing to look at it again. I don't think term limits, the idea of term limits is a bad idea, but without some sort of reassurance that we're not going to have empty chairs, so I'm not going to vote in favor for it. So I would perhaps welcome a proposal of term limits other than what's here, to account for that possibility.
You mean like a longer term?
You gotta use the mic if you're speaking, please.
Would you like to make a motion for that at this point, or?
No, I'm just voicing my opinion that I would be willing to look at it again, even though this motion didn't carry, with a more, I don't want to say legitimate proposal, because this is a legitimate proposal, but more acceptable proposal.
What would you need from staff that would be helpful to make that decision? Because you do have the option to, maybe 2 consecutive terms is not sufficient. Maybe you want 3 consecutive terms. You can have that discussion to come up with something different.
Well, is it term limits to say 2 consecutive terms, and if there's no person willing to sit in that chair, and the person sitting in that chair is willing to extend their term limit? Or what's the point of having term limits in that case?
So Dr. Adams, that's why I came up. I think you could do something like that. You could word it to where you do have the 3-year terms, the limit is 2 of those consecutive terms, with the option of extending that limit if there is not an individual, if you don't have any candidates that come forward for the position, then you could extend that out. I mean, we'd have to go back and look at how to write that exactly, but I think that is something that you could put together. I mean, you're limitless, right? Because there's nothing in statute. So unlike the boards and everything, there's definitely something in statute. So that's something you could do. And if you want to, you could either make that motion here now, or we can take it back and write language and bring it back. I don't know, Ms. Webb, if you think that there needs to be.
Can I make a
specific
motion
language.
that staff takes it back and considers language and presents it? We can look at again at the next meeting. I'm seeing lots of.
Because in other boards, there are grace periods. So even though your term expired on this date, you then are able to serve out a grace period. So that's a potential that you have.
I think that's fine to make that motion. There's a lot of things to unpack in that, including is this only limited if no one applies, and then do you have to accept the one person who applied?
Yeah. Right. Definitely, yeah.
So, there's some room to work with this and give you another option to consider.
Yeah, like perhaps a list of qualifications to fill that position.
Those already exist.
Is there or qualifications? Do they include a certain percentage of attendance at meetings?
Prior to the appointment?
No, after if qualifications include, and they are known in advance that the person is expected to attend a certain percentage of meetings, and that doesn't happen, then that person can be removed. Is what I would like to see, because that seems to be a concern with physicians and with midwives, particularly when they're coming from far away.
So you want us to actually take a look at the qualifications as well, not just, I mean, we've got two things, it sounds like, going on here. We've got the qualifications to apply to the MAC, right, that we need, that we could look at, and then possible term limits to consider.
And maybe what you want to look at is like an administrative manual, like the boards have. So we have one for board members. We don't really use that so much for MAC members, but maybe that's where you want to look, because the qualifications for it, we have to be very careful and stick with what's in statute. Or if we wanted to do a regulation, I think it's in statute, Carrie, you know, you have to have three midwives and, you know, the public and everything. And so, but maybe as far as attendance, that's something you would put in a board member administrative procedure manual, and encouraging that attendance is there. And if there's no attendance, then it would come back to basically the chair for discussion with that member, and then discussion to determine whether that member wants to continue to stay on the MAC. I mean, that's something good to have outside of even this discussion on term limits. So that's something we can do. We can actually take our administrative manual and bring it back to you also. You could look at it and see what sections apply to you. I mean, that's maybe where we need to go with that discussion outside of term limits.
That's a good idea. And that can be a separate agenda item, so we can't delve into that piece too much here. But
would that be discussion that we would bring back here, or would it be like a task force, or was somebody working with staff to develop that and then bring it to the MAC?
I think the suggestion is to bring forth the administrative manual that the medical board uses, and then have a discussion about what pieces will be good to apply to the MAC itself. Okay. And then from there, create a formal administrative procedure manual for the MAC.
And then that goes to the Ms. Perez's issues about education, because then that could be out there for individuals to look at before they come on board.
So the motion on the table now is to bring this matter back for the next MAC meeting with additional proposals for term limits and what that could look like with a fail-safe.
Yes. Is that a motion that's on the table? Did I make that motion?
I believe that you made that motion, Dr. Adams.
That was the idea. Thank you for wording it.
I think
your
that
own words.
if we're doing the administrative manual, that will answer a lot of those questions, and perhaps it would be better to revisit term limits once we have the rules in place.
So you want term limits as part of the administrative manual. So now
Or do you want to
we're
wait?
I want to second this motion.
because there's really two issues going on, because you can have term limits without an administrative manual. And the administrative manual covers a lot of different things. So I suggest, first of all, if there's a second on that motion, that move forward on Dr. Adams' motion, just dealing with new proposals for term limits. The issue of the administrative manual, you can, on future agenda items, raise that as something you want to bring back.
So then just to clarify, the motion is to have staff come back with a different proposal on term limits that has some fail-safe mechanisms within it.
And then, so you would need a second on that.
Do we have
Okay. And then any comments, and then public comment.
any comments with the board? Karen's been waving over there.
Hello, Karen Ehrlich, licensed midwife. Having been one of the original members of this council, I served 3 3-year terms. Carrie served 3 3-year terms, and we were the only ones who did serve that long. At whatever point somebody stepped down, if it was in the middle of that person's term, it created problems in terms of then if another person was elected or appointed, it wasn't necessarily to complete that person's term. It was for another 3-year term. So we ended up with too many people stepping down by their terms at the same time. And it became really clear that we need to have a certain level of institutional memory on the council itself. And I would just ask that that be taken into account when making this administrative manual, if that is indeed what ends up transpiring. And as far as term limits go, I think there are so many arguments on both sides of this that I think we saw that in these first basically 10 years of the council, that I'm not sure what the best answer is. I know that at one point, that when my last official council meeting was, there were no applicants to fill that position, and I was certainly willing to stay on. I did not reapply at that point because I was giving the opening for some new people to come in, and nobody stepped forward. I would have been willing to continue at that point, but because of the systems within the medical board in general, that was not allowed. I don't know whether that would have been a good thing for the council or not. It meant that there was nobody there for the next meeting in that seat. So we had fewer members to do official processes. I think so. At any rate, I think this needs to be really carefully thought through. It's not just a simple, straightforward matter. I wish it were.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Shamin, when you got your feedback from the midwives and student midwives in Los Angeles, can you tell us what they said about why they want term limits?
Yes, when I discussed in Los Angeles, I feel like a lot of the midwives felt that they wished that this meeting could take place in Los Angeles as well, because a lot of them wanted to be present. I feel that when I got involved, there was more of an interest as to what is going on here. And I felt like there were a lot of midwives who brought up doctors that they thought that we all work with would be interested in. And there were a lot more applicants this last time around. And so, I mean, I can just be an optimistic midwife like I think most of us are, but I think that there's a changing time right now. I'm looking at the Elmar, and it looks amazing. I think we're doing a great job, and I think there are more young social justice midwives who are coming up who want to be part of the change. And so I think the times are changing right now. I mean, when you were first in midwifery, I mean, there wasn't as many midwives. Sue Turner is number 48 who signed this. But you look at from when I got licensed 5 years ago, and the numbers are growing, and I think this is really great. So I think that there was the reservation as to, will people understand what this is and the history? Will the history be lost? And I think that it doesn't need to be lost, but I think that, I learned a lot when I wasn't here watching with the history that was said. I came onto this board because I wanted to represent women of color, and there's things that I wanted to bring in, I wanted to help at a bigger level than, just Arcadia, California, but to be more involved even with my peer review. So I feel like that was, and it was a concern as well, the other things that are voiced within the peer review. But I think that we just need to, give the up and new coming midwives, a try and a shot at what this means.
I just wonder if this is the best use of staff resources and resources of our own in a world where there's so much fighting for midwifery as it stands and so much division. I just wonder if this is the best allocation of resources, and if it wouldn't make more sense to think about this and weigh in on it later and do a major education and outreach program about what this council is and does and who we serve and why. And then we would have qualified applicants coming And they would get that chance to know what they need to do every meeting, how they need to get here, how much time off work they need to take if they travel to be here and to be present. I don't know that I can vote on anything today.
And I think that when I had that meeting with the midwives, it was a great meeting. That I actually went to 2 peer reviews. And one of the things that came out of it was they talked about how busy everybody is and how difficult it is to get here. I mean, I'm definitely in the top 5 busiest practices in Los Angeles, hands down. And immediately hands went up and said, you know what, Shaman, I'll cover you that day. And I'll take second call for you that day, because there was this importance to protect each other and to make sure that there was some kind of voice from Los Angeles in the Southern California midwives to be heard. So I feel like maybe I'm just an optimist. I always have been, but I feel like things are going to change, and I see a huge change happening already with the next generation of midwives that are up and coming.
Any other comments? My general sense is that we're all feeling that we're really not ready to vote on making a recommendation yet, but we do have a motion on the floor, right? And a second.
Can we repeat the motion? It's changed.
It's to have staff come back with a new proposal that has options in case there's not anyone who applies to fill a position, or anyone qualified who applies to fill the position, so that the person who is termed out can remain on the council. So, there's a motion and a second, it has to be voted on, but if you're inclined to abstain, we still have to count, there is a quorum here, so we still have to count the aye votes. So, just if you need to keep that in mind, an abstention doesn't delete the quorum.
So I have. So
And
if we defeat this, does that mean that, but we want to continue discussing it later?
It can be brought up again as a future agenda item.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
May I add, I believe that there could be a superseding motion to table.
There indeed could be.
I motion to table until the next meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Public comment?
Any public comment? So then, Mrs. Sewell, you want to take the roll call?
Dr. Adams,
Approve.
Miss Brelia,
Approve.
Miss Dugan,
Approve.
Miss Perez. Approve. Miss Holzer.
Approve. Motion carries to table it to, we'll put it back at the end of the meeting, we'll put it back on the agenda for next time. We're putting it back on the agenda. Are we instructing staff to do anything?
No.
No. Okay. There we go. Okay, moving to item agenda number 9, selection of Midwifery Advisory Council Vice Chair. I would like to make a motion. I had a long discussion with Carrie, and I'd like to make a motion to nominate Barbara as the vice chair.
I'll second.
Any comments or questions from the members?
You may want to ask if there are any additional nominations.
Oh, are there any additional nominations? Any comment from the audience?
Can I ask a question?
You can.
I assume that she's agreed to the nomination. You had a discussion with Carrie. Did you have a discussion with Barbara?
I didn't have it with Barbara, no. And she's not here.
That's how I got to be CAM president.
I know. I can caveat it that she's willing to do so.
Or we can table it till the next meeting. It's hard for me to.
Right, yes, I agree. I'd like to take away my motion. I can do that, right? Table the motion, is that what you're saying?
Yes, you can.
Withdraw the motion
I'll second.
and replace it with a motion to table it until the next meeting.
I'll second it.
Just going to have the same agenda.
Just to follow procedure, ask for comments.
Any comments from the members, the audience?
And now we're taking the vote.
Dr. Adams,
Approve.
Ms. Bralia,
Approve.
Ms. Dugan,
Approve.
Ms. Perez,
Approve.
Ms. Holzer,
Approve.
Motion passes.
Motion passes. And moving on to agenda item number 10, discussion on outreach opportunities for the hospital transfer reporting form. And I believe we had a little update, right, on that one as well.
The MAC had asked for staff to prepare an all facilities letter to go out. That letter has been drafted and it's going through the review process. I would expect to have that available within the next couple of weeks, and we will send that out and post it on our website.
Perfect. I was contacted by a woman named Candy Timoney, who she's involved in the regional perinatal programs and says that she's been working in outreach to hospitals on this form. She said she was actually involved in creating the form and doing outreach. She works with CMQCC. She's not part of CMQCC. Her organization works with CMQCC to provide support and information to the hospitals. She works with 30 different hospitals in northeastern California, and she has offered her support to help in any way she can to get the information out to the hospitals and anything else we come up with for her to do. She's offered her services. She couldn't be at the meeting today. She's out of town, but yeah, I'll give you her information. Any other comments from the members? From the audience? About the hospital transport reporting form, the outreach for that? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is number 11, program update. Ms. Murray?
If you'll turn to 11A1 of the licensing statistics for licensed midwives, in the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2017-2018, the board received 2 new applications, issued 6 new licenses, and had 413 renewed and current midwife licenses, slightly up from last year. On 11B1, the statistics for transfer of planned out-of-hospital delivery form, the board received 40 hospital reporting forms, all of which were licensed midwives. On page 11C1, the enforcement statistics for licensed midwives, 7 complaints were received in the fourth quarter, and 2 were referred to criminal action. No complaints referred to investigation or to the Attorney General's office. On page 11C2, the enforcement statistics for unlicensed midwives. There were 5 complaints received in the last quarter. On page 11C3 are the enforcement statistics for transfer of out-of-plant hospital delivery to hospital reporting form. The number of complaints received for licensed midwives was 40, with 1 referred to investigation. Moving on to page 11C4, the enforcement statistics for transfer of planned out-of-hospital delivery to hospital reporting form for unlicensed midwives. There were no complaints received. Next, we'll look at the 2017 Licensed Midwife Annual Report Summary. For 2017, under Section A, there were 449 midwives expected to report. Of those, the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development, OSHPAD, received 398, leaving 51 unreported. In Section D, the total number of clients serving during this calendar year was 5,932, an increase of 512 from last year. The number of clients who left care was 258, slightly up from last year. Moving on to Section E. E identifies the outcomes per county in which birth, fetal demise, or infant or maternal deaths occur. Compared to last year, the number of deaths for fetal demise increased by 6, and the number of infant deaths decreased by 1. Section F. The number of planned out-of-hospital births at the onset of labor was 3,981 compared to 3,664 last year, an increase of 317. And the number of completed births in an out-of-hospital setting was 3,297 compared to last year's 3,018, an increase of 279. Are there any questions?
I don't know if I can ask this question here or not. Stop me if I can't. But I've gotten a couple calls from some midwives in the community about what the process is for investigation. Like when we receive a report, what actually happens?
That would have to be a future agenda
It
item.
would, okay. All right.
I have a question on 11C3. It's probably been asked before, but I'm going to ask it again. There were 40 complaints received. There were 28 complaints closed. If every one of those complaints received was closed, that would leave 12. I see 1 referred for investigation and 5 currently open. And so I'm not understanding. The numbers don't reconcile in my head.
It may have been that at that time, some of them had not been reviewed yet, had been received but not, had been received but not reviewed yet.
Also, the numbers don't correlate with each other, so the number of complaints closed could be from complaints received in other quarters.
Mm. So what is the status of the extra complaints in the 4th quarter? The number in my brain, I'm saying I should see at least 40 or more. The numbers below the total number of complaints received should add up to 40 or more. I see in the last column, the fiscal year totals, the numbers add up, but I don't understand how where the 40 complaints received for that quarter, what has happened to them.
So this data is reflecting the numbers of what is generated at the time that we're pulling it.
So it's not that 40 complaints were received in the fourth quarter, but 40, well.
40 were received, but you're not going to see the outcome of every single one of them in this quarter, because it still could be held over to the next quarter. So you're going to see it the next quarter. What this is also reflecting is that of the 40 hospital reporting forms, one resulted in an investigation. And we still are, obviously, we have some pending that could have already been addressed as of now, just not at the time that we pulled this report.
So some of the complaints are still being reviewed.
Right. Probably already reviewed at this point, but just at the time that we generated the report. And you can also see that we didn't start collecting this data until the third quarter. So some of this could have also been from the second quarter.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask a question about section F? Under section F22, successful VBACs, it shows that there's 152. Can you tell me what the prior year was?
Let's see if I have it. I do not have last year's with me, but I can get you that information.
Great.
At the end of the Elmar report, you'll see the prior years. If you turn to, yes.
11D8.
Yes.
9.
8. There you go. Yeah. Thought it was there. Successful VBACs.
Is that going to show VBAC? Successful VBACs, here I see.
Okay. 2006, yes.
I see that.
159.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the members? Questions? The audience?
Is this on automatically? Hi, my name is Sharon Potiker. I'm a licensed midwife. I have a question in regards to 11C3. And at the top, it's addressing the transfer of planned out-of-hospital delivery to, it's in regards to hospital reporting forms, but yet in the table, it's number of complaints received. Does the hospital reporting form equal a complaint received?
Shouldn't.
I want to say this correctly.
Sorry. What page are you on?
11C-3?
3?
Yes.
So the reporting forms, any document that comes into the board is reviewed to determine whether it needs to be reviewed for quality of care. So it's counted so that it can be logged and documented and reviewed and processed. And if it warrants review for discipline, then that's what happens.
And then that gets, hence is a complaint?
It is processed as a complaint.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
The hospital reporting forms are processed as complaints. I thought we said last meeting that they weren't.
It's any document that comes into the board has to be reviewed to see if there's a quality of care issue.
Okay.
So I realize this has been this is Clean Joy, licensed midwife. I realize this has been much discussion, and this was at the last board meeting when we look back at notes. Obviously, looking at 11B-1 and 11C-3, one being how many reporting forms were turned in and how many reporting forms turned in and complaints made. Both the third quarter and the fourth quarter are identical to 40 each. So one has to look at these two and ask why, if 40 were turned in the third quarter and there are 40 complaints, and 40 were turned in the fourth quarter and there are 40 complaints, how one would not equate that reporting form becoming exactly what there has been much discussion about, which is every reporting form that comes in, the board is having to investigate, which was one of the things that was concern. So I'll leave that open for discussion, or whatever you want to do.
So as has been stated at numerous meetings previously, each one of these forms do come in, just like a mandatory reporting for a physician. It gets entered into our complaint database. It gets triaged. If an additional information is needed, we gather that additional information. If it needs to move on to investigation, as you can see in that one page, that the one had moved on for investigation, that it will do so. Otherwise, those get closed, but it does go into our database as a complaint, and it does get triaged and looked at. Just like every other reporting form, as Ms. Webb has stated, comes into the board and gets looked at. We are a consumer protection agency. And that is our role as a regulatory agency in the state of California. So we get that information, we have to look at it. We understand that there's discussion in the past about what the form would and would not be used for, and until legislation gets changed to change that form, we have to do what we need to do when it comes to the medical board's attention.
And then who looks at the form and determines whether it needs to go on for investigation?
So our analysts will look at that just like they do anything else that comes in. If there's enough information, we can gather and see if there's any violation of the law.
So just like it's one person, one staff person?
Yeah. And depending on what we need to do, Ms. Holzer, then we'll gather more information or whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then it'll have a manager review and everything as going through the process.
Okay.
But as you can see, from 40 of them, I think we had one that ended up in an investigation. So, and just to add to it, it's kind of like a malpractice claim that comes in for the medical board for a physician. We understand we get numerous reports of a malpractice settlement claim. That doesn't mean the doctor did anything wrong. Just like we understand that just because we got a hospital transfer form, that does not mean that the midwife did anything wrong. And that's what we aim to look at, is making sure that we objectively review those.
Rachel Keene, licensed midwife. I understand that this may just be semantics and there may not be any negative consequences for 39 out of those 40 midwives who transferred those people, but it seems like really important semantics to me if every hospital reporting form is listed on a piece of paper as a complaint. I mean, if it were the case that every time a physician, an obstetrician, said, I think that this birth has risen to the level where I would like the perinatologist down the hall to come and take a look at my patient, it went down as a complaint against that obstetrician, that would be ridiculous. Clearly, we are appropriately accessing a higher level of care, so to look at a number, even on a piece of paper that only those of us sitting in this room see, that says there were 40 complaints because the hospital reported that 40 women had been possibly appropriately transferred to a higher level of care is extremely upsetting to me as one of those care providers who appropriately transfers my healthy patients to a higher level of care.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment, if I'm not mistaken. Any transfer of a baby, any transfer of a mother to a higher level of care, where the transfer is for a higher level of care, not for insurance reasons, for a physician, is also reported.
But is it reported as a complaint?
Well, what I'm understanding is everything that comes here is considered a complaint. And if it's reported to the state of California, and they are, yes, they're reported as complaints.
So just to clarify a little bit, I believe you're talking about adverse event reports that get reported to CDPH, probably as part of the hospital transfer. Dr. Adams, I'm not sure, because that report that you're talking about, that goes to somewhere, but I'm not sure that specific report comes here. But if CDPH does find that there's a violation, they will transfer it here, and then we look into it as well. And it does come in, and we do count it as a complaint.
Colleen Joy, licensed midwife. So, having been through this process of having the complaint, understanding that this is going to be how this process will work, and it's part of how the medical board works with ensuring that public safety, perhaps there needs to be a bulletin or some type of education sent out to our midwives throughout the state to help them understand that the reporting form is a positive thing, but that it does go into the complaint section, and that they may receive a letter, they may receive a call, they may have to go in and state what those things are, because we also know that reporting form is, we're not sure of the accuracy on it based on what the midwife transferred them in for and what was going on versus what they have filled out. So we know that there is some challenges with that. And I know that's been worked on of how to go about solving that. But midwives getting a letter in the mail from the medical board that says you're being possibly looked at for investigative possibilities, they need to understand that if they've given good care, like Rachel Hansen has, or Rachel Keene has mentioned, that obviously they don't have any concerns, but the process that will happen from that letter, as Ms. Holzer said, how does that occur? And that will be something that you'll bring up at future meetings that will help the midwives in California to understand that this may be a process they may go through at some time, not because it's an issue, but because it's now becoming part of how this process works, and our sheer numbers are growing and our profession is growing. So coming from someone that has gotten those letters, that may be an education process for our midwifery that they do not understand as yet.
Mm-hmm. Karen Ehrlich, licensed midwife. I appreciate that the medical board puts this into the complaint unit. I also completely understand the midwives who are dead set against this classification. So I would suggest that the medical board consider making a category of hospital transfer reports received.
And so we've
And
already
how many
done
of
that.
those-
That's actually why, if you remember back in history, it used to be that this information was actually included on the chart on LA1. It used to be included in there. So the complaints not LA1. I think it's LB1. Hold on, let me get there. The LC1. So LC1 on the enforcement statistics. You may remember that we did include them in there originally. And then when we had this discussion at one of the MACs, we
Right.
said, okay, we're going to pull that out. We're not going to put them in there because we don't want them in the enforcement statistics. If somebody's looking, how many complaints did the medical board actually receive, specific complaints about care and treatment that a midwife provided or about a violation of the law? Let's keep those here. So that's why we separated them out. But we do want to point out that there are some of these forms that actually come in that do result in investigations then being started. And so we've separated those out for that purpose.
Well, I understand that, but if we had a category that stated 40 transfer reports received, 1 complaint extracted from those reports for further investigation so that we could see that process in the data that we're looking at.
Which I believe is exactly what we've done. I mean, Ms. Holzer,
Yeah, maybe are you just suggesting change the wording from complaint to something else?
To hospital transfer report received. Because indeed they aren't complaints, truly. I understand the complaint unit treats them in that way, but they aren't truly complaints. They aren't really somebody
they're
accusing
like,
a midwife of having done poor care.
They're like any other mandatory report that the medical board, though, does receive.
I understand that. I hope you also understand the incredible
completely.
sensitivity
No, Ms. Sarah.
of midwives about our work.
We completely understand. That's why, again, you know, at one point we tried to get the hospital transfer form changed to where it could really just be used to gather information. And until that gets changed to where they don't come to the medical board or
Right.
until
I know,
it really
but that's
looks at
that's
it
the
that way,
legislative side that we're looking at on that one.
That's exactly it. So
I get that.
yeah.
I have a question.
We actually were trying to get it not to come to the medical board at all.
Yes, I understand that too, which I think would likely be a good thing.
Is that part of the upcoming planned
Legislation
that was discussed in agenda number 6, item number 6?
So that has not been something that the medical board has put forward. I don't know if the association is doing something like that. It was something we were looking at early on, and we had been told that there was an agency that was, or a organization that was going to take that forward, and then that did not happen. So I don't know if Ms. Davis knows if that's something that could be included, or you're looking at including in any type of midwifery bill.
So your question is, would we attend to this in our proposed legislation?
Yeah, is this something that the association, this is really, it's really hard with the midwifery portion of this, because usually things like this that are for potentially to support the midwifery community comes out of an association bill, and that's where it usually comes from. We want to change when we had put forward legislation on the supervision and on the trying to get those regs through, that's because that's a consumer protection issue, because we do need to get those regulations through. This issue is something that's very supportive of the licensee, and so I'm wondering if that's something the association is
Yes, our
looking
proposed legislation would eliminate this form.
at. Okay,
Yes.
Would eliminate the form.
so there's your answer. Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Sue Walcott, licensed midwife. I have a question about the form. Is there a place for us to review, or is this purely the?
It's from the hospital, yeah.
Okay, so we
Some
don't review it.
hospitals, I understand, will, communicate with the midwife. I've heard that. I don't know if because I'm not out in the field, but for the most part, it's to be completed by the hospital.
Okay, thanks.
I think I'd like to make a comment. It's been suggested several times that the midwife taking in their client fill out a portion of that form. It makes it easier for the staff at the hospital, and your information there is correct. If you do that and give them that form, then you're going to have a say in rather than giving it to somebody who is only half paying attention and trying to have to look on your paperwork to see what happened. It's not usually accurate when that happens. So if you fill out the form as much as you can and bring it in, I'm sure they'll be happy to have less work to do.
I don't know how many midwives would think. I think that's a really difficult thing to do. I actually started originally doing that, and it's really difficult just to get past hospital staff. A lot of times, I had a doctor recently, 2 days ago, say that VBAC wasn't legal outside of the hospital in front of my client and start fighting with me about it. It's really difficult, but if suggestions are being made, something that has been working within my community is to go to hospitals are required to have an out-of-hospital transfer plan in place. So I go to risk assessment of every local hospital. I find out who is in charge of that and the head of L&D, and I make an appointment and I go in and I discuss. I let them know what my personal stats are and why I transfer. I go over, what happens in a transfer, and have developed a relationship with all my local hospitals and talk about them. Probably half of these reporting forms are mine, I'm thinking, because I do this.
I hate to interrupt, but I think we are getting away from the agenda item. And this is more a separate agenda item. And so I want to be respectful of the Open Meeting Act and keep it on task. This is about the program update, and some questions came up about how the program update was worded, but I think we're straying from the agendized item.
I don't know if we need to make any suggestions or anything on this agenda item, but it's obviously a little confusing for everybody, so I'm not sure how to make it better. But it sounds like Calm is going to be shopping a bill that will take this off of our plate, which might take it off of the agenda items too then, so we'll see. So if there's no more comments on this? Oh, there's.
Hi, I'm Jen Camel from VBAC Facts. I just wanted to say from the consumer perspective, it might be easier to understand that form if complaints received was a complaint filed, and then have another line for the hospital form received. Because as a consumer looking at that, it looks like 40 people called in and complained on their midwife. So, and that can be super confusing.
And upsetting.
It sounds like it might allay some anxiety about the form if we just change the word of complaint to hospital form received. Is that a possibility, or is that?
We'll take that under submission.
Okay. We don't need him. Okay, just leave it. Okay. Any other comments? All right, then we're going to move on to, we're already on agenda items for the next meeting, right? Yeah. Agenda item number 12. Items for the next December 6th meeting. We've got term limits already on there, right? And we've tabled the nomination of Barbara to be the vice chair for next meeting. Roseanne has requested to give the council a presentation on protected peer review.
Are we going to put in there a consideration of an administrative manual for MAC members? Did you?
Yeah, I think we should
You
put
mentioned
that in there too, the policy administrative manual.
We'd be setting next meetings too, right? For 2019.
Yeah. And it's just, are the updates on the legislative, that's just standing agenda item, right? Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if this, what the question that I was asking about, just the procedure for complaints. I've had a couple of calls from community members about the process because they were upset that they heard that the process was that their case was reviewed only by an obstetrician, and that they understood that a licensed midwife always had to be on the panel or the task force that reviews a complaint or is
So you-
involved in investigation.
You can have an agenda item for the enforcement process.
Okay, just to clarify that for everybody. So I guess, is that what we would term it, the agenda item for the process for investigations of complaints? Anybody else have anything?
Karen Ehrlich, licensed midwife. I have heard a rumor, and I realize it is a rumor, that there is a move within the medical board to change the licensing exam for midwives away from the NARM exam and to a medical board written exam. I would like to find out from staff in this next meeting on the agenda what that status is. Is this rumor at all true? And if so, to have a general discussion about the pluses and minuses of moving away from NARM and to a medical board generated exam.
That is not happening.
Just answer that question.
Right, that's
Not happening, Karen. Do you want it on the agenda anyways? It's not
No.
happening. Okay, not happening.
and just so everyone knows, you are free to contact staff to ask questions about things that you've heard, because I think it would be useful for you to be in contact to clarify, email, phone call, written correspondence, all that works.
Other comments? Hearing none, I guess then our meeting is adjourned, right?
You can just declare it adjourned.
I declare it adjourned. Okay, yeah.